Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Gopi Janavala Girivarajari Jaya Gopi Janavala Girivarajari Yasoda Nandana Vrajana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Vrajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Gopi Janavala Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Janavala Girivaradari Jasoda Nandana Vrajana Ranjana Jasoda Nandana Vrajana Ranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namah Bhagavate Vasudevaya. For reading Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, second chapter, text 21. Tasmad Bruvo Antaram Unayita Niruddha Saptaryantano Anapiksha Stitva Muhurtaram Akunta Dristir Nirbidya Nurdvan Vishvajay Yaruda Sapataryantatona Manishaka Stitva Marutatam Akunta Dristir Nirvidra Murdan Vishajet Paramgata Tasmat Buruvarantaramanityata Niruda Sapyatano Napateksha Stitva Murutatam Akunta Dristir Nirbidya Murdhan Visajet Paramgata Tasmat Buruvarantaramanityata Niruda Sapyatano Nipusetasha Stitva Murdatam Akunta Dristir Nirbidya Murdan Visajet Paramgata
Asmadrur Antaram Anupeta
Tasmat Buruvarantaramanityata
Niruda Saptayata Napeksha
Niruda Sapatayantano Napeshasa
Sivamudhard Urtardam Akunta Drishtir
Stitva Mahurtadam Akunta Dristir
Nibijamurdhan Vishujet Paramgataha
Nirbidya Murdhan Visajet Paramgata
Tasmad Prabhurantaram Unnayeta
Tasmat Buruvarantaramanityata
Niruda Saptayatano Napikshaha
Niruda Sapatayantano Napeshasa
Stitva Mahurtardam Akunta Drishtir
Stitva Mahurtatam Akunta Dristir
Nirbidya Murdan Vishajet Paramgataha
Nirbidya Murdhan Visajet Paramgata
Tasmat Prabhurantaramунayeta
Tasmat Buruvarantaramanityata
Niruda Saptayatano Napeksha
Niruda Sapatayantano Napeksha
Stidva Muhurtardamakunta Drishti
Stitva Mahurtadam Akunta Dristir
Nirbidya Murdan Vishujet Parangata
Nirbidya Murdam Visajet Paramgata
Tasmad Antaram Unyayeta
Tasmat Buruvarantaramanityata
Niruda Saptanyatano Napiksha
Niruda Sapatyantatano Napekshasa
Shidva Murhardam Arkunta Drishtir
Stitva Murtadam Akunta Dristir
Nirbidya Murdhan Vishwajet Paramgataha
Nirbidya Murdhan Visajet Paramgata
Tasmad Bravorantaram Manyateta
Tasmat Buruvarantaramanityata
Niruda Saptayantano Napeksha
Niruda Sapatyantato Napekshasa
Stidva Mahurtardam Akunta Drishtir
Stitva Murtadam Akunta Dristir
Nirbidya Murdan Vishajet Paramgata
Nirbidya Murdhan Visajet Paramgata
Tasmad Bruvur Antaram Onyanyeta
Tasmat Buruvarantaramanityata
Nirudaha Saptayantano Napiksha
Niruda
Saptayatano
Saha
Stiva Muhurtardam Ankuta Dristir
Stitva Murtadam
Akunta Drishtir
Nirbidyamurdan Visrijet Param Gata.
Nirvidyamurdan Vishajet Param Gata.
Tasmad Bravur Antaram Anayeta
Tasmad Bhurvarantaramuni Chitta.
Niruddha Saptayatano Napikshaha
Nirudha Saptatyantantrona Pekshasa.
Stitva Muhurtar Damakunta Drishtir
Stitva Mahurtardam Akunta Dristir.
Nirvidyamurdan Vishrujat Param Gataha
Nirbitya Murdan Vishajet Paragata.
Tasmad Buvar Antaramunayeta
Tasmad Bhurvarantaram Nikita.
Nirudha Saptayatano Napekshaha
Niruddha Saptatana Vasheshasa.
Stitva Muhurtar Damakunta Drishtir
Stitva Mahurtardam Akunta Dristir.
Nirvidyamurdan Visarjat Param Gataha
Nirbitya Murdan Vishajet Paragata. Tasmad Bhurvarantaram Nikita. Niruddha Saptatana Vasheshasa. Stitva Murtadam Akunta Dristir. Nirbitya Murdan Vishajet Paragata. Everybody chanted? Everybody like the chant line? We'll do the word by word synonyms. Tasmat, from there. Ruvo, of the eyebrows. Antaram, in between. Vinadyeta, should be brought in. Niruddha, by blocking. Sapta, 7. Anyantana, outlets of the life air. Anapekshaha, independent of all material enjoyment. Stitva, by keeping. Muhurta, of a moment. Ardham, Paul, or have. Akunta, back home, back to Godhead. Dristi, one whose aim is targeted like that. Nirbitya, punching. Murdhan, the cerebral hole. Vishrajet, should give up his body. Param, the supreme. Gata, having gone to. Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Thereafter, the bhakti yogi should push the life air up between the eyebrows, and then blocking the 7 outlets of the life air, he should maintain his aim for going back home, back to Godhead. If he is completely free from all desires for material enjoyment, he should then reach the cerebral hole and give up his material connections, having gone to the Supreme. Report, the process of giving up all material connections and returning home back to Godhead, the Supreme, is recommended herein. The condition is that one should be completely freed from desire for material enjoyment. There are different grades of material enjoyments in respect to duration of life and sensual gratification. The highest plane of sensual enjoyment for the longest period of life is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita 9:20. After all are but material enjoyments, and one should be thoroughly convinced that he has no need of such a long duration of life, even in the Brahmalok planet. He must return back home, back to Godhead, and must not be attracted for any amount of material facilities. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 59, it is said that this sort of material detachment is possible to attain when one is acquainted with the supreme association of life. Param Drisva Nivartante. One cannot be freed from material attraction unless he has complete understanding of the nature of spiritual life. The propaganda by a certain class of impersonalists that spiritual life is void of all varieties is dangerous propaganda to mislead the living beings into becoming more and more attracted by material enjoyments. As such, persons with a poor fund of knowledge cannot have any conception of the Param, the Supreme. They try to stick to the varieties of material enjoyments, although they may flatter themselves as being Brahman realized souls. Such less intelligent persons cannot have any conception of the Param, as mentioned in this verse, and therefore they cannot reach the Supreme. The devotees have full knowledge of the spiritual world, the personality of Godhead, and his transcendental association in unlimited spiritual planets called Vaikuntha Lokas. Herein, Akunta Drishti is mentioned. Akunta and Vaikuntha convey the same import, and only one who has his aim fixed upon that spiritual world and personal association with the Godhead can give up his material connections even while living in the material world. This Param and the Param Dhamma mentioned in several places in the Bhagavad Gita are one and the same thing. One who goes to the Param Dham does not return to this material world. This freedom is not possible even by reaching the topmost loka of the material world. The life air passes through 7 openings, namely 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Generally, it passes through the mouth at the time of an ordinary man's death. But the yogi, as above mentioned, who controls the life air in his own way, generally releases the life air by punching the cerebral hole in the head. The yogi therefore blocks up all the above mentioned 7 openings, so that the life air will naturally burst forth through the cerebral hole. This is the sure sign of a great devotee's leaving the material connection. So that's pretty far out. You can punch a hole through your cerebral hole, which is at the top of your head, by blocking all the life airs of the gates of the body. So that's pretty nice purport Prabhu is giving us there. Basically, from what I understand, the Hatha yogis, they stand on their heads so that they'll soften this area. So they stand on their heads for long periods of time. I guess there's other benefits too. Blood rushes to your head. I guess not, or you got to get used to doing something like that. You can stand on your head for hours at a time in Hatha yoga and all the blood rushes to your head like that. You know, you got to be used to something like that and make you pass out. So, yeah, so they're no ordinary persons. I used to see those persons in San Francisco, but they were actually literally standing on their head for hours during the Rath Yatra and stuff. But that was the whole idea, so that they soften this part here, the area on the top of their head, so they can bust out of there very easily, direct the life air to pierce the hole through the cerebral hole. So that would be pretty far out. Somebody's leaving their body and all of a sudden, right on the top of the head, you know. So Prabhupada said that's just sure sign of a great devotee is leaving the material connection. So, and what Prabhupada was mentioning here from in the material world, from the highest topmost planet in the material world, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest, all our places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. So, and then the Pram Dhamma, or what Prabhupada was mentioning here, Pram Dispa Nivarpante, that one can give up the lower taste by experiencing a higher taste. Like the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But seizing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he has fixed the consciousness. So that's the natural, easy process of giving up the ordinary way of life, the ordinary way that a man dies, he'll pass through his mouth. So he's an ordinary, common man. Generally, they're committing sinful activities. So the devotees, and especially the spiritual master, are never to be considered or compared to an ordinary worldly person like that. They leave the body in a whole different way. Not only that, but they live their life completely differently too. You know, the devotees, they live their life according to a life of devotion. You know, whereas sense enjoyment and material identification are being emphasized as the most important things. So people are envious of each other. People who are unattractive are envious of other people's attractive nature. So what do they try to do, right, to other people? Try to make them look bad physically, rearrange them a little bit, let alone slander. You try to slander someone really bad, try to say all kinds of stuff about someone. So these are all punishable in hellish planets. These things are mentioned. When who invites someone over to their house, they look at them enviously. Their eyes will be pierced out by vultures. The birds will come. So it's a whole different standard where the devotees, they'll enjoy the eternal abode, the param, the superior abode, the param. That abode of mine is not illuminated by the sun nor moon nor by electricity. And one who returns my abode never again returns to this miserable material world, which is full of birth and death. Right. So this is the material world, is called the Mithya Loka. So here, like what was mentioned yesterday in class, is that Maharaj Briscoe is asking Sukadeva Goswami, he's like, what's the subject matter? What should one hear and do when one is on the threshold of death? When one is on the verge of the very death. So it's hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So first, we're given a Virat Roop meditation, and then recommended to meditate on Super Soul within the heart. And it's recommended that the Bhakti Yogi he merges his mind into self and his self into the Super Soul, like that. And then let's see what else was mentioned. And then blocking all the holes of the gates, meditating on the lowest part, the chakra where Prabhupada was mentioning is, and then going higher and higher at the base of the tailbone, and just above that, under the navel or stomach, and just above that, into the chest, and then to to the throat, to the top of the palate. Now we're being recommended to push the life air between the eyebrows, and then at the proper time leave through the cerebral hole. So this is a good point to think about, especially when you're hearing about this pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and this is the yogic process. So the impersonalists, if these verses will come up, if they have any material desire, they at that particular point for the impersonalists, they won't be able to enter into the Brahman Jyoti. Prabhupada is going to be explaining Jai Gaur Nitai Ki Jai, the process of entering into the Brahman Jyoti, the process of realizing Super Soul, Kshara Dakshai Vishnu Paramatma, and the process of meditating on Bhagavan, Krishna Bhagavan. So basically, Bhagavan means the possessor of all opulences. So no one can say that they own all the complete riches or all the complete wealth, or nobody can say that they have all the complete beauty. If there's always somebody more richer or wealthier than someone else, or someone else always has more beauty than someone else, or strength, nobody can say they possess all the strength or has all of the knowledge. Nobody can actually really say that they know everything, right? Everybody says, but I think there was something like that. Somebody could be recognized as a fool as soon as they start speaking. They might post themselves as very learned persons, but as soon as they start speaking, they expose themselves as being a rascal and a fool, right? And then full renunciation, although Krishna owns everything and everything is his property. He's the most beautiful and most learned. He's also the most renounced. You're totally, given it all up. Basically, it's Atmarama is considered one who is self-satisfied in themselves. So they're devotees. they are considered Atma Ramas because they're just satisfied within themselves by hearing about the activities of the personality Godhead. There's an Atma Rama verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya explained it, I believe, in like 21 different ways. The way that he explained it, for each word, and then if you combine certain words or separate certain words, then they had certain meanings. But they're all auspicious meanings. You like that? So Lord Chaitanya explained the Atma Rama verse in this way, I believe in 21 different ways. And then, so those who are satisfied within themselves by hearing about the personality of Godhead, they're also called Atma Rama. But Krishna or Dasharadakshai Vishnu, he's also satisfied within himself, so he's Atma Rama. He's not partaking in the pleasures or distresses of the living entities. Sometimes the living entities think, okay, well, I should engage in sense gratification this way. I'm serving the Supreme Lord within my heart by giving him pleasure. Like that, so, but that's not the actual way of meditating or to please the Supreme, who's already satisfied within himself. He doesn't need your sense gratification to be happy like that. So, in fact, he's the witnessing bird. He's on the tree of the heart, and he's just waiting for the living entity to turn his face towards him and recognize him and engage in his devotional service. So he's been waiting for a long time, since time immemorial. He's been accompanying the living entity, the Jiva Atma, within their long journey, their sojourn in the material world from higher planetary systems and the heavenly planetary systems for a long duration of life. Everyone again falls down to the material planets. Prabhupada was saying like the Beatles were fallen demigods. So someone who's like really, really like a real big Gandharva or something, very, very wealthy, very opulent in this life. Good, they got really, really good karma, really, really beautiful wife, right? All the big limousines, in their front yard. The chances are they may have probably been a demigod in their last life. They're fallen down to the earthly planet. Now they're engaging in sinful activities, eating meat, taking intoxication, trying to enjoy on the standard of the demigods, but it's all karmic reactive on the earthly planet. So now they're again descending in the animal species. So they've fallen down to the earthly planet. Now they're going down the animal species, going even lower, becoming demoniac, more and more demoniac, going to repeatedly take birth in the demoniac species of life after life. Krishna mentions this, that those who are meditators on the impersonal absolute, they'll fall into the darkest regions of ignorance. That's in that also Isha Upanishad. So there's a reaction to that. That was the authorized process that Lord Buddha, he denied the Vedas because they're performing the animal sacrifice and eating animal flesh in the names of the Vedas. So it's completely misinterpreted. They had a misconception of philosophy. So Buddha just decried the Vedas, and he had his, and they were kind of like Vedic, kind of like teachings, his different, what do they call them? Well, whatever his teachings are. Yeah, I guess there's certain things that stoop this, but they were kind of like Vedic influence. They kind of sounded like Vedas, but he was making everything zero, that there's no God, and the living entity doesn't actually exist, that everything is everything itself is illusion. Even the spiritual world's illusion, the material world's illusion. There's actually everything is in negation. So that's why the devotees, we don't worship Lord Buddha, is because his philosophy is considered to be atheistic in nature. Although that he's the incarnation of the Supreme Person of Godhead, who has the compassion on the living entities, especially the animals, to stop the animal slaughter and to stop the simple reactions of animal killing, like that. And then Sankaracharya, he's Lord Shiva. He's incarnation of Lord Shiva. He was instructed to take birth as Sankaracharya, and then say one thing higher. It's like, okay, well, there's a self. It's an impersonal self that merges into impersonal Brahman Jyoti. So that exists, but their world is false, like that. So, and then Lord Chaitanya, he teaches that Achinta Beta Beta Atatva, the philosophy is simultaneously oneness within diversity. So the spiritual soul is Sat Chit Ananda, and Krishna and Paramatma, and the spiritual world is also Sat Chit Ananda, right? And so we're tiny parcels, tiny sparks of the fire, tiny parts and parcels of Krishna. So, but we're infinitesimal, where Prabhupada says Krishna is infinite. So when Krishna is infinite, he is Krishna. And then Krishna has expanded himself as this living entities, as his jiva atmas, which are his infinitesimal, right? Individual spiritual selves. Like
That's
that.
small.
Yeah, very small.
He had to do a play on words there. As the word is infinitesimal. He would say infinite, the Lord is infinite, and the living entities are infinite small.
Oh, infinite small, infinitely small.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's pretty small. Yeah, it's atomic in nature, atomic in size. You know, Prabhupada says that the spiritual soul is smaller than even the atom. And Bhagavad Gita states that if you take the tip of the hair and divide it into, what is it? Write it into 1,000 parts, 10,000 parts, right? 10,000. Take the tip of the hair, divide. So
100 parts.
yeah, because I think you chop
100 and then 100
parts.
again.
What's that?
100 parts to the hair, then divide that again, one of those pieces by 100 again.
Yeah,
10,000.
10,000. And then so but Rishi was talking to a scientist, and he knew what the size of the dimension of the tip of the hair was, and he crunched the numbers. He goes, "Oh yeah, that's the size of the atom." He goes, "I'm really impressed that in the ancient days they knew the size of the atom." So not only is the size of the atom, but there's speaking about that Paramatma is within the atom, and then there's the analytical study in the material world, where they're explaining like earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, the false ego. And Krishna states this in Bhagavad Gita also. So, and he uses the word, the terms, what is it? Vayu, Api, Bhumi, Agni is fire, Hankara, false ego. So everything is a combination of these material elements. Prabhupada was saying, just like when they take the earth, right, to make the brick, it's the earth and the water and the clay, and then they leave it out in the sun, and the sun will bake and harden it for a while. So now it's in the form of a brick, a really strong rock kind of substance. So then you build a house, and now your house, it's made out of earth. Originally it was earth. You just manipulated the products, you know, or the steel and iron mines to excavate the steel, the iron, and the coal, and bring that out of the caves, out of the ground, out of the mines, right? And then melt it down and make big giant beams, make big giant skyscrapers, right? That. So generally it's earth, or its original origin is earth, but we're manipulating it. And Prabhupada is saying, build up, break down, build up again. He's saying like this. So this is the material world. This is what we're doing. Trying to make some comfortable place where we can't stay forever. Prabhupada says, like with the rented apartment, you fix the apartment up really nice, but even though you want to stay, you can't stay there. The apartment manager says, okay, get out. Now you have to go. So the same thing, the material body, it's a rented space. It's a rented apartment according to our karma. And then as soon as our time has come, then cruel death comes and says, okay, get out. You can't protest, you have to go. So that's the whole natural process of engaging in devotional service, always thinking of Krishna, fixing the mind on the Virat Roop and on Super Soul, and then controlling the 9 gates of the material body and focusing on going back home, back to Godhead. So are there any questions or comments or?
Someone might say that Prabhupada used the word bhakti yogi in the translation, but there's no word bhakti in here, and that was a interpolation or something. You put something in, but actually, we see that it describes a kunta Vaikuntha, same thing, going back to God without any anxiety, spiritual world. So the only ones that can go akunta, back home, back to Godhead, are the bhakti yogis. So he didn't put something in that wasn't there. He just made it more clear that only the bhakti yogis want to go or even have a desire to go to Vaikuntha. And so in this verse, it talks about going back to home, back to Godhead. That means he's a bhakti yogi. And you'll find that Prabhupada sometimes would do that. He would say, he puts the name Krishna in, like Bhagavad Gita, or me, Krishna. So they say, well, it's not in the Sanskrit. But Sanskrit cannot be understood just by taking a dictionary and looking up every word. That's not the way to understand Sanskrit. It has to be understood as a whole. It's like interpreting some statement. Can't just be taken, the individual words, meanings, it has to be taken together.
Yeah, it's a specific context in accordance with the conclusion of the previous acharyas. Well, those are some really good points to make. Somebody wants to argue that or point that out, but that's really good point, and I'm glad that you brought that up. But yeah, that's the proper context. Actually, there was an ISKCON scientist named Madhavendra Puri. He was here for a while. He was saying that in the previous ages, the persons were so intelligent that when they were hearing these descriptions of like Ishopanishad, that apparently may sound like it's explaining the Supreme in an impersonal way, that they understood that they're actually really referring to specific qualities of the personality of Godhead as Bhagavan, not proving him to be impersonal, but that the Supreme is both esoteric and exoteric, or saguna and nirguna, like that. So where they're saying that the Supreme is just not nirguna, right? Possessing no material qualities, and that just makes him zero. But the flip side of that is saguna, is that possessing spiritual transcendental attributes and qualities. Yeah, but that's a really good point to make, really. Because, here they're focusing their mind on the Supreme, getting ready to hear about the topics of the personality of Godhead and his pastimes and incarnations, right? So they're situating themselves on kind of like on a spiritual nature and a spiritual basis. Here they're already talking about going back home, back to Godhead, and meditating on Rupa, the Super Soul, and then closing off the 9 gates of the body. So to prepare themselves to purify their consciousness or come to at least the platform of goodness, meditating on Virat. That's what we were discussing before, is that this was to purify the mind and the heart of the yogis to come to this platform to be able to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yeah, you have a question there?
Yogis have to use this mechanical means to try to pick the right time to leave. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes the yogi who leaves at the time when the sun is in the going in the north direction, and so there's different in the light, different times that if they leave then they can reach the spiritual abode. They don't have to come back. If they go at the wrong time, then they have to come back. And Prabhupada explains that the bhakti yogi devotee doesn't have to worry about what time he leaves the body. It's like Bhishma Dev. Bhishma Dev was lying on the bed of arrows as long as he wanted, because he had the benediction not to die till he wanted to. And so he was waiting for the right astrological moment to leave. But really, he was hoping Krishna would be there. And Krishna did come personally, and so he could stare at Krishna's face rather than just being concerned about a particular time. He is a bhakti yogi, but he also had familiarity with the other yoga system. As Prabhupada says, in former times, practically everyone knew how to practice Ashtanga yoga. That wasn't anything very extraordinary for them. But for a bhakti yogi, he doesn't have to worry about what time, whether it's an auspicious time or inauspicious time to leave the body. Whether even, it doesn't matter if he's in a holy place or not a holy place. Because Prabhupada wanted to go out on tour, preaching tour, when he was nearing leaving his body. And so he left Vrindavan. He went to, in fact, he came to London, to England. I was there when he made his last tour, last time he came there. And anyone who saw him would know that this is a person who's not long for leaving the body because so thin, so weak. But he didn't consider that necessarily the most important thing. He considered preaching the most important thing. Eventually, he did go back to Vrindavan, and that's also glorious to show the value of the holy Dham and teach how one should give up the body in that state of conditioning. But generally, a devotee he performs. If he's performing his devotional service, Prabhupada said he wanted to be out on preaching, and he said just like a great warrior, a great military man, he wants to die with his boots on. He doesn't want to die in a comfortable bed. He wants to be out in the field, dying on the battlefield. That's Kshatriya spirit.
Yes, that's nice. And that the way that you explained the example that Srila Prabhupada given, let's see, Acharya teaches by example. But yeah, the devotee, the bhakti yogi, there's a saying, it's like, where is it? They tighten their bootstraps like that. Hang on to your bead bag and tighten your bootstraps and go back to Godhead on the battlefield, preaching about the glories of the Supreme Person of Godhead. So yeah, that's the spirit, the devotional spirit. Yeah, Krishna takes care of everything. So yeah, we don't have to worry about the proper time or place to leave the material body like the yogis do, or that was mentioned in previous verses too. We're reading about, again, an example of Bhishma Dev. Maharaj Sanatu gave Bhishma Dev a benediction that he did not have to die unless he wanted to die, because Sanatana Maharaj wanted to marry what was her name?
Satyavati.
Yeah, Satyavati. And so, but her father was a simple fisherman, born Itaki Jai. So he was thinking that Bhishma was going to be the king, that his son wouldn't be the king. even though he would wed his daughter to a king. So Bhishma Dev, he approached Satyavati's father, and Bhishma had decided that he will remain lifelong brahmachari, so he won't become king, but his daughter's son would become the king, like that. So then he agreed that Sanatana Maharaj can marry his daughter. So Sanatana Maharaj was so pleased that that Bhishma had arranged this marriage, that he gave him the benediction: "You not die unless you want to die." So then that's what happened on battlefield of Kurukshetra, that Bhishma Dev was shot with so many arrows that his body didn't even touch the ground. It's called the bed of arrows. But he simply was just waiting. But yeah, he wanted to see Krishna's face. He wanted to see Krishna's lotus fruit. Narada Muni came, Vyasadeva came. They're all great sages from the heavenly planets, and they came, and as well as the Kurus and the Pandavas were assembled. But Bhishma Maharaj, Bhishma Dev, he just simply waited for an auspicious time, like that. He can stay on I guess the battlefield of Kurukshetra lasted for 28 days, and Bhishma Dev was in this position for like 15 days, 10 days or 15 days like this. So no ordinary person can have so many arrows pierce through their body and not immediately die, by yogic powers, cities, retain the life air within the material body, and even in a very crippling condition. Did anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, so where you connect class there. Srimad Bhagavatam class ki jai.